Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. I'm really excited to present our guest today. Her name is Emily Sauer. She is the CEO and inventor by necessity for Ohnut, which we're going to talk about a lot more on today's show. And she's also the founder of the Pain Perception Project and Pelvic Gym, all things I love talking about.
Woo!
So welcome to the show, Emily, and thank you for being here.
This is exciting. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Okay. So I want our audience to learn a little bit about you. So before we get there, though, the first conversation I had with Emily, it was really interesting because about 3 years ago, I vividly remember sitting in my desk, writing my patient notes for my pelvic patient, and my colleague who treated at the same clinic as I at the time, she looked at me and was like, "Oh my God, did you hear about this Ohnut thing? It's really cool. Like, we should go check it out." And I remember her opening up the website or something about it, like an article. And then I skimmed through it. I was like, "Yeah, that's so cool." And I went back, and that was it. And then very recently, somebody we both mutually know right now connected the two of us together to talk about everything that we're going to talk about today. And so I invited Emily on the show, and that's why we're doing this. So yay!
It's a small world. I mean, it's amazing. It makes me very happy. So it's crazy because so much of our traffic to the website is organic, which means because while we can advertise with Ohnut, because it's a sexual health product, it's a little bit harder to put ad spend behind. So it's really wonderful that like we get references on Reddit and in person, and because there's so much constraint around and isolation around painful sex, that when we do finally have that outlet, and when we do feel like we've discovered a part of ourselves that was latent, then the voice comes with it. So it makes me so happy to hear that, our world has gotten loud vocally and that you and I are here. Yay.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so for the audience to know a little bit about what the heck Ohnut is and what your journey was getting here, I would love for listeners to hear about it and for me to hear about it too.
Yeah, well, I mean, full transparency, I had deep pain during penetration for the entirety of my sexual existence. So when penetration went too deep, it was really uncomfortable, and it kind of was on and off, but the resounding thought was that I didn't have the confidence to say anything to any partner that I was with, and I just thought that I was normal. Like I come at the ripe size of 4'11", so I'm smaller than the average bear, and my assumption, truthfully, was that a partner was, quote, hitting my cervix, or that I was small. And every time that I asked my GYN for help every year, they told me that that was normal. Again, no tests came up abnormal, nothing was wrong. I was told, like everyone else, to have a glass of wine and use lube.
Very cringing.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing is that I went online and looked for painful sex. And because I didn't have the vocabulary to know what I was looking for, I got like the scariest search results you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And then I looked for products that could potentially help, and everything that could have been helpful, be it a pillow or some kind of a buffer ring or whatever, was marketed for male performance. There was not a single product that acknowledged that sex might be painful for me. Yeah. And so I just stopped looking, very honestly. It was easier to stop looking than to try seeking out answers without a toolkit.
Yeah. And then you discovered Ohnut.
Oh. Well, I discovered it. I reached rock bottom is what happened. Yep. Oh my God, it's amazing. Like, people underestimate how much stress can affect our sex lives and the physiological response from stress. And I was in a particularly unhealthy relationship at the time, and sex was particularly painful. But every time that sex was painful, it wasn't just a physical experience. I was just deeply disappointed in myself. I wasn't the partner I thought that I was. I wasn't the woman that I thought that I was. And I just started to push everyone away at that point because I just felt so out of control of my body. And, on the flip side of that, I thought maybe if I put a donut around a penis, to customize and deep penetration when maybe I wouldn't hate myself so much. And it turns out it worked. So
I have like so many questions of like the moment of eureka when you thought, like, do you know, or did it just kind of like roll in your mind and did you mull over it and it just like one day you were like, oh, maybe I should pursue this idea? Or was it like, oh my God, here we go. This is the solution.
I was like joking around with a coworker and we were in a car on our way driving to work and it just got silly and we were just joking. And it was the first time that I had ever told anyone that I had pain during sex.
Right.
And we had like music on, we were dancing in the front of the car and it like the vivid imagery was a pink frosted donut on a penis. And we just thought that was the funniest thing until I actually took it seriously and was like, wait, no, but that might actually help. And it's amazing because it's such a simple concept, but there was nothing out there that was doing it.
Oh, man. And then I feel like the next step there is you hit rock bottom. Well, just to circle back one thing really quick, from a pelvic floor physical therapist standpoint, who treats anything related to dyspareunia at least once a day, if not 5. And dyspareunia, for those who are listening, is like a generalized term for pain with intimacy and intercourse, which is kind of like saying lower back pain, which doesn't mean too much because we don't have a reason why it's happening. There could be multiple reasons. But one of the reasons could be because of tight musculature. So I'm going to just go on like a quick thing about the way that I would describe to my patients is oftentimes when something is painful or you're afraid of something or when something is stressful, we get into this high guard position where a lot of our muscles start to tense up. It's a natural evolutionary phenomenon to try to fight, freeze, run, kind of one of those fight or flight responses. And so when that happens, our muscles at the pelvic floor, which stretch during penetration, can also tighten up. So it's kind of like trying to put a hot dog through a straw. It's not going to work. It's going to be restrictive and there's going to be a problem with that. And for most of the time, it is the female counterpart who experiences that. And so because of the pain and the stress, there's more sense of tightening, restricting, and holding and guarding, which kind of perpetuates a response. And this is not the only reason why somebody might have painful sex, but this is just like one thing. But just to your point, when you said you were in a relationship that wasn't the best, for lack of a better word, I'm sure you have many ways to describe that. But and you are, trying to, be in this intimate relationship and you're, it doesn't help when you have pain. And we're always told I never want to use the word always, but we are often told as women to kind of deal with things, like you said, take a glass of wine, chill out, don't complain. And that's just kind of the language that's used in society. And I think the reason why I really wanted to have a conversation with you today is because I think it's wonderful that you've come up with something like this that's not invasive of the woman or the female, but that's more of like, fix yourself, boy.
Yeah, well, it's a partnered product. So, okay, so just a quick explainer on how it works. So basically, if you could see, it's a series of rings that are worn at the base of a penetrating partner. So if you think about the Fisher-Price donut stacking toy, just visually, that's the basic concept. So you put lube on your partner and then lube inside of the rings, and the rings are worn at the base. And during penetration, they basically compress down like a bumper. Rings don't go inside the body. And what's cool about it is that they can be added or removed at any time during any position so that you can control exactly how much goes in.
Yeah.
So before, where there was a sense of silence and shame, I know, having not talked about painful sex for over 10 years, that is a hard habit to break. Speaking up when sex is painful. It's like, what do you do? How do you say something without potentially offending a partner? How do you say something without ruining the moment? It's like there's so much fear around actually advocating for ourselves. But when you bring Ohnut into the equation, all of a sudden there's this third party in the bedroom that takes away any judgment. So it can be like, hey, do you want to add one ring? Do you want to take one away? Like, let's try this position with 3 rings. Let's try that one with 4. And then when you're trying these things out, the dialogue becomes like, how does this feel? And like, oh, like it feels great. And then you can just relax, enjoy yourself, because That's the whole point.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that too, I never actually thought of it the way you just did, which is like thinking of it as a third party, because that takes the pressure off. And it turns it, I think what you're trying to get at also is like psychologically it turns into more of a playful game or something that is like an accessory, which tends to, for people, accessories are fun, typically, in a lot of sense in American society, at least. So I think that because it shifts the language to playfulness and games, I think that it also reduces the tension in the room, and it makes the penetrative counterpart person also become kind of accountable, active.
Yeah, an active
What's the
participant.
word? Tell me a little bit about that.
Accountable place is a little bit of finger pointing.
Okay. Not accountable isn't the word. Participant. I think participant is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. I mean, because ultimately, and then the first question that people always ask is how it feels for a penetrating partner, which is ironic because it's made for a receiving partner who's experiencing pain, but it is a collaboration and everyone's enjoyment is a priority. So, but people underestimate the psychological impact of mutual enjoyment. Like, a lot of times guys just want to know they're doing a good job. And when they can not have to worry about hurting a partner and they can relax and fully enjoy their body, like that feels so good. And they also, objectively speaking, they warm up, they feel like skin, they're super stretchy. So yeah, it really is interesting how much emphasis is always placed on the penetrating partner in this dynamic.
Right. Yeah. What is it made out of? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's made out of a blend so that you can use, it's a body safe blend that you can use silicone-based lubrication and water-based lubrication with. Because it was important. For some folks, silicone lube lasts a little bit longer. It's a little less mentally intrusive. So it's important that be compatible.
I love it. So I guess my next thing is, where I know that, from when you conceived this idea in your brain to now, there has been so much that's happened, and it's been a journey, I'm sure, that you've enjoyed thoroughly, and that has also taken you in different directions like maybe you didn't think that it would take you. So I'm curious to know, what did you think you were going to accomplish from this that you have or have done differently at this point, a couple of years down the line? And then the tag along question is, where do you see this kind of going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, so as a patient myself, I don't come from a clinical background. And it was really important from the very, very, very beginning that this kind of product have clinical backing behind it. So interestingly enough, as much as I had been lacking any proper gynecological education prior to creating Ohnut, when I started Ohnut, people were so eager to talk about it all the time. And so I bought a plane ticket and a ticket to a medical conference, a sexual medicine conference, as a nobody. Like, turns out you can just go to medical conferences. I had no idea, but I did a bunch of research in advance and found the top 5 people I wanted to talk to, and learned more in that conference than I had in a lifetime. And it's been my mission since then to recruit clinicians who are caring of their patients and who are trustworthy in their information, and promote not only a product, but a perspective change around painful sex so that people can advocate for themselves. Yeah, I mean, I guess so along those like clinical lines, like we're in Harvard Cancer Research Center, we're in Mayo Clinic. They actually came to us to carry Ohnut because clinicians are just as desperate for tools as patients are, and mainstream people who aren't maybe seeing a doctor yet. So, and we're doing an IRB approved study with an endometriosis specific patient population as well, which is awesome.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think right now, sexual health oftentimes is limited because it's so hyper focused on orgasm and pleasure. When in fact, if we step back and we shift away from the pleasure perspective to the patient perspective, there's a lot more that we can learn. And that creates a foundation of safety and security that ultimately leads to more pleasure. So like, it's kind of this side door into the sexual health space that I'm really proud of.
And I'm a huge fan of, because I think everything you just said is just right up the alley of where we should be moving together as a society. And I think that it takes these small things and small, pushes and nudges for the medical field to evolve and change. And obviously, this, and we've talked about this before, but it's really hard to break away old habits and old ways of thinking and the old ways of treating and the old ways of communicating. And this isn't to finger point to any particular professional or any particular field at all, but I think in general, as a whole, it has been challenged, well, at least, as a pelvic floor physical therapist who works very closely in this field, the number of times I've had a patient come to me with experiencing any kind of symptoms. It doesn't even have to be just sexual, bowel, bladder, and sexual function issues for years, decades, even dozens of years. And they have been told that this is just the way it's going to be, when there's just so much evidence that we have in literature that still hasn't translated into clinical practice, that there is a solution that's beyond get a glass of wine or go get mental health help,
Yeah. One kind of easy way to frame it is that I'm a little happier to point. It's okay if you don't want to point fingers. I'm okay pointing fingers a little bit. But OBGYNs are generally trained in infection, disease, and childbirth, not pain, particularly not sexual health. And PTs are far more versed in the musculoskeletal system than any OBGYN, which is why you guys are so much more helpful in the diagnostic process. And people just don't know that. We're told that our OBGYN is the guiding light of information, and they're not.
Yeah.
It's a systemic problem that, and bless like this podcast, it's like PTs should be known. Oh my God. Okay. So I'm also 7.5 months pregnant. And I went to a childbirth class, sorry, total tangent, childbirth class last night. And one woman asked, it was really wonderful, that push prep and blah, the one woman at the end asked, is there a way to prevent tearing? And she basically just said hot compress and localized massage. And the person asked, okay, but are there any other ways to relax your pelvic floor? And the instructor said no. And I was like, I took myself off mute and I was like, wait a minute, diaphragmatic breathing, like step one.
Yeah. Did you, I hope you said something after. Okay.
I did. And I'm going to write them a note. But it's interesting, even in the environments like pre and postnatal, like people are really encouraged to take childbirth classes, and the people who are teaching them still don't understand the musculoskeletal system. And why are we, it's like you're learning everything about everything that you should be buying or acquiring, but not the body that is going to push the baby out.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Girl, yep.
Sorry.
I'm 100% on board with you. No, I'm so happy that you concur and that you tagged along with that. Interestingly, actually, my listeners kind of know, and maybe somebody who's listening fresh who hasn't listened to previous shows, I founded a 501c3 called Physical Therapy International Service Foundation. And so we help with one of the pillars of our service is health education. And so we have created, as a biased pelvic floor physical therapist, I've created, and with my team of PTs and student PTs, we've created all these different kind of workshops for health education around pelvic floor. And so funny enough, I literally just got off of, speaking with an individual where we're going to be teaching these workshops, not to patients for once, and rather to the OBGYNs, the nurse practitioners, the doulas, and all of them, because it's just so important for people to understand these clinical implications, because patients look to get answers. And it's unfortunate that we don't have the, means to disseminate that information in a way that people are receptive of it in the health fields. And it's really, really hard to, like I said this before, it's hard to unwind people out of old habits and old ways of practicing. When we have clinical evidence, we have so much research and, literature that supports conservative treatment for so many of these conditions. The number of times that I've had somebody tell me that their cystoscopy, all of their tests come out negative for any kind of infection, but they are still prescribed antibiotics and they are told to deal with it. It's just frustrating to me, because at that point, we should all as a society be like, there is something that we're missing here.
Totally.
And that's why I think this is important.
And without a referral too. That's the biggest kicker, is that okay, fine, maybe you're not equipped to deal beyond surgery and medication, but at least provide a referral to a PT. that's kind of the frustrating part. And I think to your point though, about like the cultural shift, they're from the top down, our systems have to change. Like our medical systems fundamentally need to change to the clinical education for our med students. But on the mainstream human side, just fundamentally understanding that sex shouldn't be painful. Like it doesn't have to be. That doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you or that you're broken. 75% of women will have painful sex in their lifetime. And that's only those who report it.
Yep.
It's likely significantly higher. So, I mean, one of the big missions around Ohnut is just affirmation and validation, so that people can, that each of us can recognize that sometimes sex is hard, and talking about it is hard, and that's okay. And here's like some tools to get there. I actually, if it's okay with you, there's a note that comes in the box.
Yeah,
I'd love to
go
read.
for
it. Basically, when I was creating the product, it was really important to me that every interaction with the box, with the product, felt like a hug. Because the experience can be so shameful and isolating that it's like, I just thought to myself, like, what did I need to hear when I needed to hear it the most? And that's what went into the writing on the box. It says, "You made it. A big congratulations, not only on your new Ohnut, but also on the hard work that led you here. The journey is never easy. I tell you with my full heart, you are sexy exactly the way you are. You're a problem solver, a shoulder to lean on, a spreader of joy. You put a lot of love out there, and you deserve to live that love you share. So in the spirit of curiosity, embrace adjustment, awkward moments, and small mighty victories. And know deep down, but not too deep, that you're doing great. Now go play. All of my love, Emily."
I have the chills.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I think just people, there's a sense of doubt, of self-doubt. There's like a fundamental identity that gets compromised when sex is painful. And I mean, we are all lovable and worth loving exactly the way that we already are. So I think that's a big part of the change that needs to happen as well.
I love it. I want to give you a hug right now through the screen. We have to meet in person to do that.
Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for Ohnut. I mean, it is a catalyst for a world of opportunity. Yeah.
I love the messaging. No, it's not. I think the messaging behind, I mean, it seems simple. The product seems simple, but it's actually revolutionary in a lot of ways. And I think that's what you're trying to say, is that it really is, because I see so many times a day how much somebody's symptoms can affect their entire life. Like you said, their identity, who they feel like they are in the world. And what breaks my heart sometimes is when the worst part is when somebody can overcome the pain and they can manage the symptoms, but still they're like, I just don't even want to anymore because of the letdown so many times. Like I've actually been in that position where we have accomplished and achieved our goals of pain-free intercourse or dilator, how much we're inserting dilators or whatever the case is. And they're like, I know I've had this long and arduous journey, but I'm at like a place where it's just been so exhausting sometimes. And I just feel like I need to get into like the state of just feeling like loved first, because I know this is physically not an issue anymore, but I just need to like feel like I love myself. And I think that's like something else that I need to go through, because there is that intersect between your emotional health, your physical health, your sexual health, all that stuff. And I love that messaging behind it, because it brings it together and it really helps somebody understand that while this is challenging and while, you're not alone, number one. I think that's a lot of times something that helps people, because they constantly ask me like, is this something you've seen before? Like, is this something that you have treated? Like, do other people go through what I just told you? And I'm like, yes.
all
Yes.
the time.
All the time, every
All the time.
day.
But like, how wild is that? That for such a shared experience, each one of us feels alone. Like, that is wild. It's wild. Oh,
I know.
and I
And that's
think,
why we're doing this
yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. And I think you made a really good point just now. There's a gross misunderstanding that female arousal works the same way as male arousal. Like all you need is like physical sensation, orgasm, but it's really contingent upon the biopsychosocial model. So biological, psychological, social. Like biological is like body integrity, hormones. Psychological is your relationship, how you feel about your body, and then social, it's like religion, social contracts. And if any one of those pieces is broken, then our sexual identity could be compromised. It's not just a matter of buying a vibrator and sticking it on your body and hoping for the best, because that's not going to do it.
Yes, I know. Yeah. And I'm happy that you brought that up. The biopsychosocial model is so important for people to understand. I'm biased and I say it's the most important when it comes to pelvic health. I know it's not, it's everything. It has a biopsychosocial model, but I just, as a clinician who works with people who have frozen shoulders and ankle sprains and postoperative, it's all very involved. But when it comes to bowel bladder and sexual function, and particularly sexual function, there's this like huge ring around it that I feel like is often overlooked or under recognized by the medical system. And I hate that that happens. I hate that people don't look at it for what it is and validate it for what it is. And use that biopsychosocial model that you just described so beautifully in their care without just looking at a person as a diagnosis and being like, punch you to the next guy, punch you to the next guy.
Totally. And what's kind of beautiful about it with Ohnut is that because the partner's involved, the partner's kind of brought into that biopsychosocial model as well, because they start to realize the value of the interpersonal like dynamic of sex, not just the physical output.
Yes.
And how much richer that experience can be when you're not so focused on how you're doing or like, how does this physically feel, and you actually just get to appreciate your partner and appreciate yourself together.
Yeah. I love this. Is there something that you feel like you haven't shared with us today that you want to let the listeners know about either your journey or Ohnut or anything about where you see yourself in the future?
Oh my gosh, I'm like, you asked that. That's like such a wonderful question. I mean, I'd say just check out Ohnut. Like if you're ever at a loss for conversation and you want to talk about painful sex, be like, there's this weird stretchy ring set that you can wear. It's just like, it's a really easy conversation starter. People bring it up in their doctor's offices if they're having a hard time starting conversation there. I'd also just because we're making content around this right now, there's a lot of misconceptions around why sex is painful. And the two biggest misconceptions are penis size and the cervix bang. So if you fall into either one of those camps, just maybe go onto our blog. We have two beautiful pieces about the penis size and the cervix bang and how to kind of navigate those conversations, because we get people ask us constantly about
where do people find your blog? What's the URL?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just go to Ohnut. You can just Google, you could even Google penis bumper. Like you can just, however you remember Ohnut, you can put it in Google and we'll be there. In the education section, our blog is called Just the Tip. Yes. So, if you ever want to laugh. Also, our content, it's like super important that our content be relatable. So we're not going to like, it isn't hyper medical or hyper sterile. Like it's really lovely. Everything's got a good sense of humor. So
good. I like that. Yeah. I mean, I the number of times that somebody's been like, I'm really sorry, but I want to talk about like, do you feel, I'm like, do you know what I do for a living? Nothing is off limits here. Anything. Load it on me. What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's cool also, I mean, so along with conversation starter lines, the Pain Perception Project was a tool that we created to facilitate conversation between patient and provider. So it's fundamentally an online intake form that includes questions about your pelvic health, sexual health, but also it really dives into the experience of painful sex. Like where does it hurt? When, for how long, and then it migrates into kind of goals for treatment. So it really helps an individual understand like what it is you're actually going through, so that when you get to a provider, there's a lot more confidence there.
That's
And also
great.
the goals for treatment part is really important, because I feel like a lot of times it's like, I have pain during sex, but it's like, okay, does that affect your relationship? Does it affect your like hanging out, your ability to go out and hang out with friends? Does it affect how you feel about yourself? Like having those things kind of clearly defined creates a much clearer path forward.
Yes, absolutely. It keeps both the provider and the patient accountable for the work that's being done and be able to shift gears if we're not moving in the direction of the goals, which, I mean, as a PT, it's first thing you have to ask in anything is, you have back pain. Well, what's your goal with back pain? What do you want to
Totally.
be able to do that you can't do right now? And what's our time frame to accomplish that we can set together that's reasonable, but also logistical and make sense to you. But yeah, no, absolutely. And so tell us about pelvic gym too, because that's the other piece.
Yeah, pelvic gym is awesome. So it's kind of, so I guess in some ways similar to your platform. Basically, it's a lot of, it's a video platform with content made by pelvic floor PTs. So it's a combination of educational content and then kind of accountability content. So we know that a lot of times dilator use is hard to stick to. It's not super comfortable. It might be like an emotional burden. So we have all these really wonderful like buddy videos where you can do some of these exercises with someone, and they make it fun and warm and fuzzy, so that it makes the whole process way more enjoyable.
I love it. Amazing. So we'll put Ohnut's website below in the show notes so people can check it out, and look at the education section, check out their videos. If somebody who's listening today is resonating with anything that we discussed, or knows somebody who's resonating with anything that we discussed, please send this over to them. And please reach out, because I think that there's lots of solutions that we feel like we can't really have in our hand. And here we are giving you a solution. So take advantage of it. Try out Ohnut, see how you like it. And I'm sure that and everybody's experience will be different, but that our goal here and what Emily has put out into the world is to improve the quality of your life and your sexual life. And so if that happens because somebody listened to this, then I am the happiest gal in the world today.
Woo!
Well, thank you
Yeah,
so much, Emily.
thank
Is there
you.
anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, this is wonderful. It's always nice to, I mean, you come from like a very informed, I mean, you see so much of this all the time. So I just appreciate the space you're creating for it.
Of course, my pleasure. I'm so happy you came on the show, and hopefully we'll have you on again when Ohnut
Yeah.
grows more too.
Oh my gosh, let's do it.